Thank you everybody for joining us today. We have Steve Davies who will be presenting a session on how to use a to-don't list to manage your time. Steve is a time management expert, and he's a tab business owner in Long Island. And I will get Steve to introduce yourself in a second. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Your lines are all muted, so if you have any questions or issues, just pop them in the chat box on the side there. And this session is also being recorded and will be available on our website later today. All right, Steve, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Welcome, everybody. As Stacey said, my name is Steve Davies, and I've been a tab facilitator, or franchisee rather, for 12 years now. And during that time, and before really, I've been working with my clients on time management issues, because I see that it's one of the prime things, one of the most difficult areas that people struggle with for reasons that we'll go into a little bit as we go through this. And as part of it, I've developed a somewhat idiosyncratic view of time management, because I don't think it's about managing time. I think it's about managing activities. And where the to-don't list comes in, which is what we're going to be talking about today, I've developed a system for removing things from your day. It's difficult to do, and the central piece of the way that I do it and what I work on with my clients, my board members, is using a to-don't list to identify the things that don't belong in your day and the things that you need to get rid of. So that's what we're going to be going through today. And the object of the goals for today are to review some time management challenges, talk about separating the what from the how, which is a central part of this, some techniques for building these to-don't lists, some common things that belong on your to-don't list time management lists, then some things you can look at or things to think about in terms of dealing with the I don't have anybody else to give it to syndrome, which is barking dog, and then some execution methodologies. This is all a lot of this stuff you'll find on my website, which is the Time Edge. This is what it looks like, and on there you'll see that there are a number of articles. I'm putting a blog together, and this is where I'm presenting or putting up my time management thoughts and processes and systems. So have a look at that, and the blog will be launching within the next a couple of weeks probably. There's a few things on there, but I'm going to be launching it properly very soon. So let's talk about time management generally for a moment. So time management's the wrong phrase, because you can't manage time. It can manage you, certainly. It's about changing your relationship with time, taking control of what you allow in your day. It's about not allowing other people to spend your time for you. Those of you who were on my webinar a few weeks ago, we talked about the 15 golden rules, and a lot of that was about interruptions. And if you allow people to interrupt you, then you're essentially allowing them to spend your time or choose how you spend your time. And it's all about taking control of it, being accountable for your choices. And I use the hourglass methodology for this. And the hourglass concept says that time, or time management, if you like, is like an hourglass. You can't change you can't stop the grains falling through the hourglass unless you turn it on its side, but that would be cheating. But time passes inexorably on, and those grains are falling through from the top to the bottom. You can't stop that happening. We all have 24 hours in our day, but some people seem to have more time than others. And the key to this, in my view, is figuratively, it's about changing the grains that are in the hourglass. And those grains metaphorically represent activities that you allow into your day. So it's about changing the things that you allow in your day. And a big part of that, obviously, is getting rid of the things that don't belong there. So that's my hourglass concept. And it sounds easy, but as we all know, it's actually a difficult thing to do because time management is really about transforming behaviors. There isn't one place where you can find time, and you have to view time in a different perspective and really focus on identifying what's most important to you, and then design your day with that in mind. Again, that's the subject of another whole set of issues, another webinar probably, about designing your day to mirror the biorhythms that are most positive for you, doing the most important things at the time of day when you have most energy. But it, for the purpose of this, it comes down to managing events and outcomes, and specifically identifying the things that you do want to do, or in this case, identifying the things that you don't want to do to make room for the things that you do, which is where the to-don't list comes in. So the concept of time in the abstract is really a waste of time. People talk about time management, and I have to call it time management because that's what people look for. But it's not about managing time. It's about relating the way you spend your time to events, to focusing on what's important, um, and focusing on the things that you want to do, not the ones that other people think you should be doing. Um, and you create time by taking control of your choices, by becoming proactive, and by electing not to do something else. And I can't overstate that enough, that this is all about electing not to do something else. So if you can, the goal really here is to look at the way you spend your time, identify a number of hours a week that you think you can save by eliminating things that you shouldn't be doing, um, and then going through an execution process to make sure that you do that. So sounds all well and good, but how do you start that process? I think the best place to start is to come back to the Stephen Covey grid of the urgent and not urgent, and important and not important. The slide's not quite lined up, but you get the idea. That important should be over the two boxes on the left. So things are either urgent or not urgent, and important or not important. Um, so as we look at that, then the things that are urgent and important, the things that are in that top left box with the one in it, um, those don't represent a problem. They get done. They're crying out for attention, so we do them. And important in this instance means that it's important for you to do them. Um, then we have things that are urgent but not important. And if you take the definition that I just gave you, not important means that it's not important that you do them. So that is working below your pay grade. So if you have things that are below your pay grade, they may be, they'll be urgent certainly, and they may be important. But if the value of your time as a business owner is $450 an hour, say, to use a kind of a ballpark figure that I think is a minimum that we should be using, then if you're doing a $20 an hour activity that's below your pay grade, then clearly that's not important. Not important that it should be in your day. Um, but unfortunately, we do the things that are urgent and not important second because they're urgent and they're calling for our attention. Then in the bottom right, you've got things that are neither urgent nor important, and these are the things that are big targets for the first trip through the to-don't list, because these are things that you should never do, right? If it's neither urgent nor important, then why the hell are you doing it? And the answer, I think, for a lot of people is that they're doing it because it's on their to-do list, and they like crossing things off the to-do list. And well, that's a good idea. There's a simpler way to cross things off the to-do list, which is to put them on the to-don't list and never to do them, or to find somebody else who needs to do them. And then the bottom left-hand box is the things that are important but not urgent. That's really the grail here, because what we're looking to do is to create more time for those things in the bottom left, because those are the things that add value to the business. So really the goal here is to work on the right-hand side to get rid of the things that are not important out of your day, to give yourself more time to work on the things that are important. Um, the difficult thing is to find the methodology to identify the things that are on the right-hand side, the things that are not important, and the things that you need to get rid of. So, as I just said, the goal is to eliminate the not important so you can create time to handle the important. Um, and what we're going to be talking about is developing plans to identify the things that don't belong in your day and create plans to eliminate them and then execute and monitor your performance. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes. So why don't we do this? Why do we have a time management problem? I think first of all there's a failure to execute. We do these things, they're ingrained, we're used to doing them. Maybe we like doing them even though they're way below our pay grade. And so we're not even sure we really want to get rid of them. That's the first one that I see again and again. That I was talking to a guy the other day, one of my clients, who said that he's got three things he needs to eliminate, and we've been talking about them for a while now, and he knows he needs to, but he's just not getting around to it. So we're working together to help him overcome that and to execute and to actually figure out a way to get them out of his day. At least he's identified them. And I think identification becomes a big part of the problem, but more of that in a minute. The second problem I see is the tyranny of the urgent, our good old friend. And what that looks like, I think, is that a task comes up and it's in the important but the urgent but not important category. So it needs doing. Um, sorry, the urgent but not important. I don't know if I just said that. Anyway, so it needs doing, but not by you. But unfortunately, you haven't delegated it, so there's nobody else to do it. So it comes up, it's screaming for attention, it has to be done. There's nobody else to do it, so you do it. And then when you've done it, you just heave a sigh of relief and say, thank God that's over, and move on to the next thing. And then the next time it comes up, it's urgent again. So you go through this same vicious circle, because what you need to do is to to identify that task as something that you don't want to do, and then figure out how to get rid of it when the pressure's off, not when the pressure's on. Because when the pressure's on, you're driven by the tyranny of the urgent, and you've just got to get it done. Um, the third thing I see is the do-it-yourself syndrome. Much easier to do things myself. Takes time to delegate them. Why don't I just do it? It doesn't take long. Those are key words I often hear. Well, it doesn't take me long. Only takes me, half an hour or whatever, and it would take me a lot longer than that to uh, have somebody else figure out how to do it. But yeah, okay, it only takes you half an hour, but guess what? It takes you half an hour a day, or even half an hour a week. That's 25 hours a year. It adds up over time, and if the value of your time is $450, then that 25 hours that you're spending with that half an hour a week um, is a big number. Um, and then the last one is really tied up with that, which is delegation issues. That it takes time to delegate. It's a pain in the rear end to do so. Um, we're not good at it. We don't like it. We'd rather just do it ourselves and keep control. So those are some of the issues. But I think that the root cause of all of it comes down to not separating the what from the how. And that's where the to-don't list comes in. So let me spend a few moments just giving you the kind of the overview of that. So what happens, I think, to a lot of people is that the what needs to be got rid of and the how you're going to get rid of it exist in your mind at the same time. That there's a task that you want to get rid of, and up it comes. Here you are, you're doing it, and you think, I really wish I could get rid of this, but You can't think of how you get rid of it. There's nobody to delegate it to, and so it leads to inaction because you just keep on doing it yourself. Because every time it comes up, um, you just do it because it's too complicated to think about how you're going to get rid of it. And for big tasks in particular, this is going to be a continuing issue for you because um, I had a client who said that he wanted to get rid of invoicing. Well, that's a huge statement because getting rid of invoicing isn't just one item. So he had no idea how he was going to do it. So of course he never did, at least until we sat down and broke it down into its small constituent parts. And the first thing was to deal with the timesheets. Then it was to deal with the preparation of the invoices, and there were about 5 steps. And we started at the beginning and started eliminating um, the steps one at a time, and he was able to do it. But when the what and the how exist in your mind at the same time, it's very hard to actually um, make any headway with figuring out how you're going to eliminate them. So what you've got to do is to separate the what from the how. And this is the core of my whole system, that if you can allow yourself to dream, if you can allow yourself simply to say, um, I'm going to identify the what I want to get rid of without even thinking about how I'm going to do it, then I think you can start to make progress. So what that means in very blunt terms is that you're going to identify the task that you want to get rid of, um, let's say while you're doing it. So that task that always comes up is always urgent, and you always end up doing it because you never think about doing anything about it when it isn't urgent. Well, you write it down, and the what piece of it is that you simply log all the things as you're doing them that you think you shouldn't be doing, without even thinking about how you're going to get rid of them. That's a later stage, and if you can separate those two things in your mind, so that the what and the how aren't aren't connected. Well, obviously they become connected, but when the process of identification is completely separated from any thought about how you're actually going to get rid of the task, then it's going to lead to action, and you're going to find that you can tackle these things and create a list, a to-don't list of the things that don't belong in your day, um, and then pick them off one at a time or two at a time, or find groups of them, and that's when you identify the how. So the tough part of this, I think, is in, or I believe, is in separating the what from the how, because it makes the what a lot easier to do, to find. It becomes the key to building your to-don't list is not to worry about how you're going to get rid of it, just to identify what it is, and then you've really got an opportunity to do something about it. So um, that this slide just summarizes what I just said. Separate the what from the how. The key thing here is to free the mind. Allow yourself to dream, just to say, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to get rid of this. I don't have anybody to delegate it to. I don't even know how to begin to delegate it, but I don't want to do it. If you can write it down, then it can be the first step in a conversation, where you figure out later how you might do it. And your mind will be much more receptive to the idea of figuring that out when you're not driven by the tyranny of the urgent of having to get it done, but you're sitting there in the calm light of day talking to your coach or your facilitator or an employee or somebody about how you're going to get rid of it. So let's move on to talking about how you're going to go about creating your to-don't list. Um, And the core of the system is my to-don't list log form. I mean, look, you don't have to use my system at all, obviously. I've got some forms here that you may find helpful that I've developed. Um, but the key thing is to write down the things as you identify them. And the form that I use, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is a very simple form that just has what the task is. Um, it only looks at the what. There's no how on it at all. All it contains is the short name of the task, a description if necessary, and the time spent on the task. That's quite important, I think, that for when you move these things onto the log that we're going to go on and create. But you don't even have to put that on at this point. All you're going to do is to take this form and write down the task that you want to get rid of. So really a very uh, simple starting point. So if you print off a bunch of these and keep them in your drawer somewhere handy, then every time you come across something that you think you shouldn't be doing, you just take one of these out, you write down the task. Um, if you want to put in how much time it's taking, you can do that now, you can do that later. The important thing is just to get the task written down and then put it back in the drawer with uh, the sheets to deal with later. The whole point of this is that we're not going to do it now. All we're doing now is identifying the what. So, so that's the kind of the collection form, and there are a number of different ways that you can identify things that happen during your day that you shouldn't be doing. So the first is the activity elimination list, and this is a one-off project where you sit down, and I'm going to suggest we spend a couple of moments on this now. So start thinking about this. Um, you sit down and start just proactively identifying things you do that don't belong in your day. And those will be things that are below your pay grade. If you're doing $20 an hour tasks, um, think about those to get rid of. Think about the things that you do. Think about um, the things that you did in a particular day or a particular week. Um, the behaviors that you allow that are going that cause you to take on things that you shouldn't take on. Um, the problems that you accept from other people, letting other people delegate upwards to you. Um, Problems caused by, or tasks that are caused by lack of organization, lack of planning, lack of delegation, that you're doing things because you haven't figured out how to find somebody else to do them. So think about those things. But the key thing here, that is they're below your pay grade. So that brings us to our first poll question. So what are some examples of activities that don't belong in your day? And Stacey's going to put that well, it is up on the upper left-hand corner. So start put some things in, some things that you think you do that don't belong in your day. Maybe things that you haven't figured out how to get rid of. You don't know how to get rid of them. It's too complicated. There's too many things going on. Um, okay, so we have the first one. We've got HR duties. Okay, so that's an excellent starting point. So HR duties is a very broad category, can cover a lot of things. But the way that the to don't list operates is that you take that and you just write that down. So all you would do is you write down HR duties. You don't put any more thought behind it at this point. Um, uh, don't put down anything other than that at this point, um, because we're going to get into that later. This is just about identification. Now, because HR duties could include a whole range of things. It could be anything from um, I don't know, completing the I-9s or handling Cobra, whole range of things, and the answer to how you're eventually going to eliminate it could be anything from hiring an HR person, getting fractional HR, outsourcing it, giving it to your CFO, a bunch of things you could do with it, and probably in parts. So that's an excellent starting point. Then we've also got too much time spent on email. I agree. um, whether that can go on your to don't list per se, unless there's a way that you can. Well, again, actually, yeah, just put that down and then try to figure out what that means and how you can deal with it at a future point. Um, Building maintenance. Yeah, I had a client who, as we spoke in a board meeting, actually, he ended up, he was telling us that um, the amount of time he was spending on building maintenance, and the building was actually owned by him and his siblings, and he was doing the building maintenance himself and not getting paid for it. Um, and he came up with a solution that worked for everybody, where they paid him to do it, and then he found somebody else to do it for less money. So it was actually a good solution. What else have we got? Um, Taking political fundraising calls. All right. Um, Reading junk email, taking phone calls from canvassers, um, too much time spent talking with managers in the morning. Um, Facilities maintenance issues, email again, correcting invoices. Um, okay, so let's just take two of these and spend a moment on them. So, um, reminding, harassing colleagues to hit deadlines. So, um, these are coming in thick and fast. This is great. So so here's the start of your to don't list. Let's talk about correcting invoices for a moment. So again, that's a wide that's an issue, or a thing, a problem that can have any number of issues and a lot of different solutions. We're not interested in issues or solutions at this point. The way that this would work, or this would flow through the process, and I'll come back to this as we go through further down the chain here, is that the starting point is that you would simply write down correcting invoices on your log form. Um, so one day you're correcting invoices and you think, I shouldn't be doing this. So you get the form out, you write down correcting invoices on the form, and you put the form back in the into the into the box. Um, so then at some future point, when you feel like it, you can then, in the cool light of day, when you're not so busy, if you ever get to that point, you can then take that out and put it on your to don't list log, which we'll look at in a minute, and say, okay, so now how am I going to deal with that? So you've identified the what, and you've simply allowed yourself to dream, if you like, that you've no idea how you're going to get rid of it, or you may not, but by taking that out of your mind, what you're doing is simply identifying the problem, and then we can deal with the problem later on. Okay, so let's move on from that, from the poll question. And some of the activities I've come across that don't belong, writing and signing checks, people who are writing out their own checks. I was doing a time management seminar one time, and there was an accountant whose big aha was that he was actually writing out the checks himself, which is clearly a case of the shoemaker's children. Um, Visiting the bank. I've got a lot of clients who like to go to the bank. Um, Not sure why they do. They say that, oh, it gets me out of the office. Well, if visiting the bank is, if that's something you find pleasurable, then I guess so. But I'd rather go out to the office and get out of the office and go and take a walk along the shore, or do something else rather than going to the bank. So it's costly uh, and a big time waster. Reconciling bank statements, almost certainly below your pay grade. You can review them, by the way. You can review the bank statements, review the reconciliation, but actually doing the reconciliation, almost certainly below your pay grade. Creating financial statements, again, doing the data entry. I hear people say, well, it's good for me to do the data entry because I get closer to the numbers. Well, you actually get a better sense of the numbers if you're doing the review rather than the entry. Um, Handling company insurances, completing bid forms, um, typing and dictation, or doing your own typing. I guess not using voice recognition software. I think people waste a lot of time typing their emails, dealing with emails they don't need to deal with. So there's a number of issues. But uh, what we do with the one-time, so back to the process. So a good first step in building your to-don't list is just to use this form or a form like this to log a number of, just brainstorm in the way that we've done on the log form on the left here. Is just write down a bunch of things on here right off the top of your head that you think don't belong in your day. Um, then I'd use this for kind of like bulk identification. Yeah, maybe every so often. But then what you're going to do is you're then going to take this and you're going to probably transfer these things onto the log form that we looked at earlier. But this is a good starting point to just sit down and think about, okay, what are some things that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing? Um, then the next way that we can find um, I just got a question, where do we download these forms? If anybody likes to send me an email, I can send you the forms. I think they're on the website. I'm not sure whether they're in downloadable form, but I'll happily send them to you if you send me an email and ask me for them. Um, so the next thing we're going to look at is converting your to-do list, because this is a good way to find things that belong on your to-don't list. I touched on this earlier, um, where I was talking about the urgent and important grid. So the things that are neither urgent nor important, they'll be on your to-do list, and the simplest way to get them off your to-do list is just to move them to your to-don't list. So how does that work? Um, so you need a to-do list. I don't talk a lot about to-do lists. I'm more about identifying things that don't belong in your day than figuring out how to run the tasks that are in your day. But that's not to say that I don't think that it's important. Um, so the reason you need a to-do list is because you should list everything. If you don't do that, it leads to overlapping commitments, and uh, having a to-do list frees your mind from thinking about tasks until you're ready to work on them. And actually, scientific research has shown that if you do put your thoughts down on paper, it frees your mind from thinking about them, and you sleep better, you're more relaxed because you've kind of contained the problem. Um, And then with your to-do list, the best way to handle a to-do list is to break, your to-do list should be a pretty big list because you should be putting everything on it. But then you're going to break that large list down into smaller day-to-day manageable lists, and then determine the priorities that you need to adopt to tackle them. And the key thing is, and lots of people say this is, I'm just giving you things that I've seen over the years here. Start the day by identifying 3 to 4 key items that you feel are essential to complete today. Um, Put those down, write them down, and keep them with you, and make sure that you get those things done. And then the final thing is, I think this is Brian Tracy, eat a frog first. Um, and what that means is pick the task that you least want to do, and do that first, because once you've got it out of the way, you feel a lot better about it, and otherwise it hangs over you all day. That's what to do with the to-do list. But then we also want to, what we're talking about here is identifying things from the to-do list that really belong on the to-don't list. It's a great way to identify things. So go through the list. Create another column on the right-hand side is the way that I suggest people do it, where you can put an X, and and then look for the things that are urgent but not important, the things that don't belong in your day, that are below your pay grade. Um, Put an X next to them, and then create either create a separate list of those items or just fill out a to-don't list log form for each one. Um, and then you can cross them off your to-do list, unless, well, hopefully you can cross them off your to-do list if they still need to be done, if they're the urgent category and they need to get done. You may need to deal with them either by delegating them now or by doing them yourself. But then at least creating writing down a to don't log form so that you know you'll come back to it and figure out a way to eliminate them. And then when you've written out your forms, you just file them in the drawer and do nothing more. That's the beauty of this, that you're only focusing at this point on the what. You're not trying to do the how. Um, then the third way of doing it is a daily review. And the daily review, um, each day at the end of the day, you take 5 minutes, maybe even 3 minutes, and you just sit down and you say, reflect on the day. Say, okay, what did I do today? How did I spend my time? And what did I do that I shouldn't have done? Um, and then I've got a form for that, which I'll show you in a second. Um, but then you can use that to just jot down what you did today and help you identify what you shouldn't have done, what should be going on your to don't list, and then there's a space at the bottom of the form to write down your to don't list items. And here's the form here. So I've just got it broken down in time slots. So what did I do this morning? What did I do middle of the day? And what did I do in the afternoon? And then at the bottom, what did I do that I shouldn't have done? And jot them down here. And then it's generally simpler, I've found, to then take this and not keep a stack of these, but to put the tasks onto the log form the very short log form that I showed you earlier. So that's the daily review, and then there's the on the go, where you're just identifying things as you do them. So you're sitting there, you're correcting an invoice, and you say, why the hell am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. I don't want to do this. I don't like it. And you reach into your drawer, you pull out a log form, you write down correcting invoices, and you put the thing back in the drawer and carry on with what you're doing. And you, at this point, do nothing more. You still correct the invoice, but you've written it down, you've identified it, which means that it's now on the to-don't list and is a candidate to have something done about it, and which is where we're headed. And here's the log form again that I suggest people use. So then so now we've got a drawer full of these things, and we've accumulated the data, and now what we need to do is to transfer this information maybe on a weekly basis onto a report form. You don't need to do it that often because this is kind of like an ongoing project. So, and of course, some of your things on your to-don't list logs will be duplicative. You may identify the same task several times and just and fill out another form for it, and that doesn't matter because where you're going to find that is when you go to create your report, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And the report is going to have also columns for other things that we're going to need later on, and you can either complete those when you fill in the report or you can do it later on, and the report will become your to-don't list. So let me show you the report so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this is an Excel spreadsheet that I've designed. I'm actually putting together an online app for this where you can log your items, and then they'll automatically go onto the report which will be available online, so that it'll take a lot of the pain out of this. Because the reason why people don't do this is because there's pain involved. It's difficult to do. It takes time, takes energy, but there's a huge payoff. And here's the payoff right at the top here. So this person has got five tasks on here: check writing, going to the bank, um, handling documentation for fleet vehicles, completing bids, and handling the company insurance. This is one of my clients, actually. I just went through this with them. So the annual hours go up into the annual hours box, the 340. Um, the annual value is the value of your time. I've only got $300 in there. I think that the value of your time as a business owner is probably at least $450. That's certainly the number that I use in my thinking. Um, and and then we'll multiply the hours by the value. And so if this person was able to figure out how to get rid of these tasks, then at $300, this would be worth $102,000 a year to them in additional opportunity cost and time that they now have available to do other things. And the idea of having it in a spreadsheet is that you've got the ability now to sort it and deal with it. These are quite big items in here. They could be things that are only half an hour or annually. Okay, it could be 5 hours a year or 10 hours a year. You could end up with a lot of things on one of these sheets, and then I suggest that you categorize them so that you can group them by category, and also by likely elimination tactic. You may delegate it, you may outsource it, you may simply eliminate it and not do it anymore. And then on the right-hand side, I'm still developing this, but you can put in a priority code for how important it is, a priority code for how difficult it is. Also going to put a value component in there, and then there's an algorithm that I'm developing which will rank them for you based on the amount of time that you would save, how important it is, and how difficult it is to get rid of. The intention being that we want to get to a point where we can be looking at, have this list automatically ranked so that we can pick off the low-hanging fruit and identify the things that we should start by trying to eliminate from our day. So uh, I hope all that's clear. If you do have any questions, you can type them in on the chat form, and I'll try to get to it. I've been looking at the things coming, which seem to be mostly about where do we get the forms and the PowerPoint, and we'll get all those out to everybody. So I'm going to move on from here, and we're going to start talking about delegation. But before we do, there's another poll here that I'd just like you to think about. Just off the top of your head, how many hours a week do you think you spend on tasks below your pay grade? Is it less than 3 hours a week? 3 to 5? Well, you can see the poll as well as I can. Phil, just nobody's going to audit this. It's just interesting to get an overview of how much time people think they're spending below their pay grade. So we'll give those a moment to come in. So at the moment, 52% is in the 7 to 10 hours a week range. That's a lot. Think about that 10 hours a week, 25% of your time is spent doing things that are below your pay grade, that in theory could be done by somebody else. That's a big number. Now, that's not to say that it's easy to get rid of them. I'm certainly not saying that, but I think it shows just how much potential there is for you to drive a lot more value out of your business and out of your time. Okay, so we've spent quite a bit of time on the what and identifying it, because I think that that's really the most difficult part of this, is just finding the time to to get a list together, to get your to-don't list together of the things that you shouldn't be doing. But then obviously you've just captured Greenland if you simply produce the list and never do anything with it. So the next thing is the execution as to the how, as to how we're going to get rid of it. And so there are what I'm going to talk about under time execution for the next 15 minutes until we finish are um, the activity elimination plan. You look at your list regularly, you categorize, as I've already talked about a little bit. Then you make a written plan for each activity, and on that plan you list the dates, actions, and obstacles. And it's an execution plan. It's not a complicated document. Don't think that it's some giant plan just because I've used the word plan. It's a one-page form that talks about how you're going to get this task out of your day and into somebody else's. Um, and then going to spend a few minutes talking about delegation and outsource resources. Barking dog syndrome. I'll talk about that. And the the how inexpensive it really is to delegate tasks to other people. So we've talked about separating the what from the how, and I think that makes it a lot easier. So then what you've got to do is periodically look at your to-don't list, which is the Excel spreadsheet we were looking at a few moments ago. Um, and the best thing to do when you start out is to set a target for the hours that need to be saved. And so looking back at our poll, 50% of the people say that 7 to 10 hours a week. So the best starting point would be to say, okay, I'm going to look at my to-don't list and I'm going to eliminate 3 hours a week. I'm going to pick enough tasks that come up to 3 hours a week that I'm going to eliminate. It's important to have a target because you need to push yourself a little bit. Um, so having got your target, then you can look at your list, you can categorize and sort it to find the best candidates. They may just jump out at you, but the object of the exercise here really is to find the low-hanging fruit, to find the things that are easiest to get rid of because they're high priority and not difficult to delegate. And if they also have a high time value, then that's better still. Um, Pick the ones that are least productive in your day, and then you're going to fill out an activity elimination plan for each one. So let's look at the what the plan looks like. So I promised you a simple plan, and here it is. You're going to put the activity which comes from the log form that we looked at earlier, um, and then the elimination plan is how it's going to be eliminated, who's going to be given the responsibility to take it over, um, and then some dates for when it's going to be transferred. So within that, you can get a little more granular, and you can develop a form that's got use a spreadsheet that's got some steps in it, and if it's a complex task, there may be more than one date in it and more than one responsible party. So you can just put columns on the right-hand side to deal with that. And well, we want to talk about how it's going to be eliminated. Um, you need to think about and possibly cover what the potential obstacles are um, to getting this done, what can go wrong, who's going to take over the responsibility, follow-up dates, the date that it's going to be eliminated. And this all sounds relatively simple, but of course there are the issues of who it is you're going to delegate to. So let's spend a moment or two doing that. So the excuses why people don't delegate, why they don't eliminate things from their day. Um, First of all, I like doing it. Well, that's yeah, you may like doing it, but if your time is worth $450 an hour, and it's a $20 an hour activity, then you can like it as much as you like, but it's not going to like you back. Um, the second is that my staff is overloaded, and I was guilty of this when I had my company. That I looked at my people and they all seemed to be stressed, and I thought, oh, I'll just do it myself because my CFO is already pretty maxed out. Um, as if I wasn't, right? I think I was under more stress than anybody else, frankly. Uh, and uh, and I was perhaps too considerate, and I didn't want to overload my staff. But you just have to do it, and if the if it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, then well, you need to hire somebody else. I'm pretty ruthless about that these days. Um, then the third one is there's nobody who'll do it as well as me. That's the business owner is God syndrome, and we just need to get away from that. There's nobody else to do it. There's nobody in my organization who can handle this task. And allied to that, number five, I can't afford to hire anybody else. Usually hear those two in tandem. So let's look at some things that I think demolish those arguments. Uh, the first is barking dog syndrome, which I mentioned before, and that's to me the barking dog is the ultimate metaphor. That barking is um, the activities we do that don't belong in our day. So barking is a word for I guess things that are below your pay grade. So if you're working below your pay grade, then uh, that's the barking, and the two components are why have a dog and bark yourself, and if you find yourself barking, get a dog, because you shouldn't be barking yourself. You should be finding somebody else who can do the barking. Um, so the first one, why have a dog and bark yourself? I meet a lot of people who have an assistant, they have other staff, and they they don't want to give them stuff for the excuses or the reasons outlined earlier, probably that they don't have time, it's too difficult, they don't think the people have the capability. Um, but you have to delegate as much as possible. You've got to identify the activities below your pay grade, the things that are on your to-don't list. You've got to be ruthless with yourself, even if you enjoy doing them, and you've got to get rid of them. And then also you've got to make sure that things don't come back up at you, and you should never allow people to delegate upwards to you. I worked for the chairman of Barclays Bank in a prior life, and I stalked him for about a week once, trying to get a decision from him on something. And when I finally tracked him down, he just looked at me and said, "Never delegate upwards," and that was the end of the conversation. So it's not a bad phrase to use, actually. Then the second piece of the barking dog is if you find yourself barking, get a dog. So a lot of people say, "Well, I don't have an assistant. I don't have anybody to delegate to. There's nobody in my organization who can do it, or I'm a solo. I'm a a sole business owner. I don't have any employees, and I don't have anybody to delegate to." Well, you've got to look at what the cost is of doing it yourself, because it's easier than you think to find somebody on a part-time basis to get a part-time virtual administrator, um, and also to think about outsourcing things, because there's this old saying that milk is cheaper than a cow. And why would you do something yourself when you can outsource it to other people? I have clients still who do their own payroll, which makes very little sense to me, because it's a classic case of something that's below your pay grade, where it's a commodity that somebody else could do for not very much money, and the cop out is, well, it doesn't take me long to do. Well, maybe payroll is one of the things that should be on your to-don't list if you're handling payroll yourself. Um, Arguably, you really shouldn't be, because it's almost certainly below your pay grade, at least anything to do with processing it. Then I want to talk about the admin ROI concept. So The way this works is this. So in looking at this deals with the I can't afford to hire anybody to deal with this excuse. So let's go back to the concept of your hourly value. So think of an hourly value for you. As I've said, I think that for business owners, it's probably $450 an hour. If you're not comfortable with that number, you can go with a lower number. But pick a number because this is important that you do this because we're going to look at the return on investment from that you can get from hiring somebody to do some of the things that are below your pay grade. So, so you take your hourly value and then you take the hourly cost of an administrator. So let's suppose you hire somebody at $12 an hour or $15 an hour, that you can do that. And I placed an ad on Craigslist for somebody to handle some of my marketing overflow work. And I found very qualified people for $10 an hour. I found a woman who only wanted to work 5 to 10 hours a week. Um, we hired her and sent her work, and it saved me time that I would otherwise probably have ended up spending myself, either directly or indirectly, because my assistant would have had to spend time, and maybe then wouldn't have been able to delegate as much to her. So it's not difficult to find people who can do this work. Then you've got to multiply it, or you've got to come up with what I call an effective time factor. So let's suppose that that anybody you hire is going to take 3 times as long to do it as you would. Um, I hear the complaint a lot that people take too long to do things. Well, I can do this in 10 minutes, and they're taking half an hour. Well, okay, but you're worth $450 an hour, and they're worth $10 an hour, so it doesn't really matter if they take 3 times as long as you. So the effective rate is the what it actually costs you to get that done, that comes up with the revised effective rate. So if your hourly cost of an administrator is $15, your effective time factor is 3 because it takes 3 times as long, then the revised effective rate is $45 an hour. So then, given all those, your hourly value, the revised effective rate of an administrator, what's the return on investment if you hire somebody to do something for you that's below your pay grade? Well, it's a big number. If it's using $450, $15 an hour, and an effective rate factor of 3, it's 1,000% return on investment. Now, that implies that you can go out and spend the time you've gained on an activity that's worth $450. And if you're just going to go and play free sale instead, then you've probably just captured Greenland. But if you can take that time and use it more effectively in your business, then the return on investment is huge. So think about that when you find yourself saying, well, I can't afford to hire anybody to do this. So let's sum up. What I've talked about today is separating the what from the how. And I think that you have to do this with ruthless efficiency. You've got to make it a regular activity. You really need to build a to-don't list. I think it's easy to do. You can use the forms or techniques that I've developed, or you can figure out another way to do it yourself. But I think the concept of creating a to-don't list and working it the way that I do is a really effective one. You need to set an elimination target for the number of hours that you want to eliminate. It'll make you much more effective in doing it. When you've selected the tasks, you must create written plans. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist, as I've said earlier. And the written plan will really push you to actually follow through and eliminate it. And you need to create a system to do that, to monitor those plans and to follow through with the activity elimination. And then finally, rigorously examine new commitments. There's no point doing all this if all you're going to do is to fill up your day once more with things that are below your pay grade. So one of the things about time management is that it's never over. there are always things that are creeping back into your day or creeping into your day that don't belong there. And so this to-don't list is an almost perpetual activity. And if you can ingrain some system like this into your daily activity, it'll make you much more successful in the way that you spend your time. So that's it. Time management webinar must finish on time, and so it's 12:57. So thank you all. I hope you found some value here, and I'll happily send the forms to anybody that wants. And if anybody has any questions for me, then do feel free to email me at sdavies@tabli.com. And I'll happily respond to any questions or any suggestions you have, or as you use the system, if you have any thoughts or input, that would be very helpful. So thank you all very much, and I'll let you go.
Thank you, Steve. This is an area I'm sure that many of us can benefit from. You had a lot of great tips there. Thank you, folks, for joining. You will receive an email shortly with this recording, and for those of you that have requested the forms from Steve, we will make those available to you as well. Our next webinar is January 15th. We will have Amy Newsom from Newsom Law Firm. She will be discussing writing job descriptions and how to stay compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So check out our website, www.thealternativeboard.com, for details. So that wraps us up for today. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Okay, and thank you, Stacey.